One of the activities isn't so much a report about what we did, but a report about what we didn't and ought to have done. In that respect, it's, I suppose, not a report at all, but as much as a catalogue of a missed opportunity. Our strategy from the start was deliberately low-key. It was to choose a small number of local government seats that we would fight intensively with warm-up leaflets and so on, with, in a way, very little else. Now, that was very good as long as we'd kept to it. We did in some areas, Julian Leppard particularly, to a lesser extent, Kevin Meeson's seat, we put a warm-up leaflet up and so on. In some areas, it didn't take place. The problem with that strategy was that it gave the impression to the people out there that we were doing nothing at all, because we didn't publicise the work that was going on in our chosen wards, because that would have alerted the opposition. So we beavered away quietly doing that, but didn't say anything else. And that was really the danger. I said from the outset that what we ought to be doing is having some street activities, thereby getting pictures and putting them up on the website. Now that was countered by a number of people. We'd unwittingly given the impression that we were the do-nothing party. So however much work was going on in the ward that Kevin was fighting, and Kevin put a lot of work into that despite the fact that he was suffering really unbearable knee pain. You know, he went out on every occasion and forced himself to. And Julian Leppard put a lot of work into his and in one or two other areas. But that wasn't visible work. Our members out there didn't see that going on. Right, if I can move over to policies. Our policy statement, this has not been produced in the last year, of course it was produced before. I say, possibly some people might be cynics and say that's because you drafted the first draft. Oh, can't be that. I think in some ways it's one of the most important documents we've published. Although I did the first draft, there was a lot of toing and froing, a lot of negotiation about this word or that word and so on. And surprisingly, for a document that's been produced by a committee, it has fewer strange mangled sentences than one might otherwise expect. But I think the important thing about it is that, unlike the manifesto of a certain party with which many of us were previously connected, that simply states policies, this states ideology as well. So to that extent, it's an educational document and not simply a propaganda document. And I think that is the important thing. Now, it's been decided only this afternoon that although this might be commendable, it's not an easy read. So if you hand it to somebody who simply wants to know in the pub, well, what do you stand for? And we say, well, can you take this away, learn sections off by heart and come back in 10 days when you've finished it, might overwhelm some people. So we're suggesting a piece that one side of A4 that contains perhaps 6, perhaps 8 different policy things. So those who want to ask for the first time what we stand for would get one of those. But it will be followed up by one of these so that people can, if they want to read in greater depth, they can in fact do so. Now, I was asked at the previous NEC meeting to think about a manifesto for the general election. Should we fight some seats? I don't think it's necessary for a party that's considering fighting so few seats to have a full manifesto. All it's going to do is to, 1, take a lot of time, 2, cost a lot, 3, duplicate much of what we've got in the policy statement, And fourthly, allow our opponents not so much cherry pick, but perhaps to deadly nightshade pick and pick out the bits that are the most damaging. Rather than do that, what I've suggested is we have a document with 6 electoral proposals. I've put in here, I've just got a little quotation from it that you might like to see. We would encourage hospitals and educational institutions, and perhaps business institutions, to enter into partnerships with those in Africa and other parts of the third world. That sounds nice, doesn't it? We're nice people after all, you didn't realise that, but we are. Their brightest and their best would be encouraged and provided with career incentives to remain in their countries of origin and seek the betterment of their own populations. On British citizenship, I've said to refer to all of those with British citizenship as Britons, as the paper often does, is not only inaccurate, it's highly insulting. It's hugely insensitive to treat the ancestral nationalities of our immigrant populations as though they're of no importance. For many, even of the third generation, they're tremendously important and must be respected. Those who recognise their importance, that is, among the immigrant communities, should not be persuaded to integrate themselves and pretend to be British. Rather, they should be persuaded to reinvest themselves in their countries of origin. You'll notice I've committed a dreadful literary flaw there. I've used the same word twice, but I think reinvest is such a nice word it deserves to be used twice. Thank you very much.
And like everybody else in this room, I'm probably extremely suspicious that UKIP is nothing more than an establishment safety valve to fill that gap. However, I still believe that it's doing a valuable job because it's legitimising our agenda. Now, people have said, okay, it's filling a space, it's soaking up votes that would otherwise go to us. It's certainly true that Farage has boasted about how successful he's been in winning over BNP voters. An example, Keighley West, back in 2006. Between 2006 and this year, it went back to its Labour fold, though I imagine with a certain amount of disgruntlement. What's happened is, I think, that quite simply people are still smouldering with the way they've been treated by Labour. They've found an outlet in the form of this UKIP candidate. But if he fails them, or if he's stabbed in the back by Mr Farage, I think they will come to us. Anyway, there's a series of points I just wanted to make. The most important one, I think, is that the gentleman over there said about UKIP. It has legitimised an agenda which was regarded as extremist 10 years ago. And we stood back in the early 2000s opposing Europe and opposing immigration were the wilder fringes of the extreme right. They are now mainstream politics. Every party is having to adapt to that. But they're not doing it because they want to do it. They do it because they detect that the popular mood has changed and that they have to do it. So the establishment is, you can hear the pit props creaking, basically. Whether or not UKIP is purposely designed to mislead people, it can only do that for so long. And the closer it gets to power and to having to make decisions, look what's happened to the Lib Dems. The moment they actually got real power in their hands instead of being professional virgins, the moment they got real power and people realised they were just another party, their supporters collapsed. So what's happened is our agenda has been legitimised, but we haven't. The other thing is, like a number of people here, I'm worried about the fact that he's only opposing European immigration. Simply saying what UKIP are doing, but more to the, in inverted commas, to the right, I don't think is the way forward. I prefer what Andrew was saying, which is let's rephrase the question in a way which outflanks criticism. Like Andrew, I'm much more worried about the fact that the heat has been taken off non-EU immigration. Why are we still having any non-EU immigration at all? Yes. After all, if we've got 18 million or whatever it is, 27 million, the figure changes daily, unemployed Europeans, and the purpose of the EU is to look after Europeans, Surely we should be encouraging Brussels to pass a law saying there will be no more immigration from the third world until the last European person on the dole is employed. If it doesn't do that, what's it for? And that's why I think there are certain advantages in us not saying, simply parrot fashion, the UKIP thing, let's leave the EU in a cloud of dust. We have a lot to do inside the EU which would further our cause. Why are lots of West Africans becoming immigrants? Partly it's because of things like civil wars and the rest of it. Though if you look hard enough, you'll probably find that the interfering finger of the EU isn't very far away. But there are certain specific areas. I'll mention textiles, agriculture and fishing. Textiles. Ghana used to have one of the most vibrant textile industries in West Africa. Ghanaians were noted for their flowing, colourful robes and the rest of it. The industry has collapsed. Most Ghanaians are now wearing second-hand English clothing. Every day, second-hand clothing handed in at Oxfam and various other establishments. You think it's going to the poor of Britain. It's not. It's going to the middle classes of Ghana. It is bailed up in huge container lorries and sent off to Ghana, where it is sold up and down the country in markets at prices which have meant that the indigenous textile industry has collapsed. It cannot compete with second-hand goods from Britain, which are brought in daily. And those immigrants are not leaving their families behind because they want to. They're doing it because they have to, because they're starving. And they're starving because the EU is starving them. The same is true of fishing. For some reason which I cannot understand, the EU gave the Spanish fishing industry the rights to fish up and down the West African coast. Quite what business it is of the EU's, what fishes off the West African coast and how they managed to acquire these powers, I do not know. But the Spanish fishing industry is now hoovering its way around West Africa, Mauritania, Senegal, the rest of it, sucking up every fish and shellfish in sight, leaving a desert behind it. There is nothing for the indigenous fishermen to fish. So of course they're beating on the doors of the EU, desperate to find money to feed their families because the EU has destroyed their income yet again. So that's textiles, that's agriculture, that's farming. No wonder a lot of the third world is trying to get into Europe. So rather than saying stop immigration, why don't we say stop, what was that chap Blair saying? Stop the causes of immigration. But to do that it's going to be a little bit more complicated than simply saying let's leave the EU in a cloud of dust. Leave it behind it and all its problems. It won't work like that because we'll still have the problems, but we won't have any opportunity to change them. That still needs people like Andrew, if you like, going to Brussels and standing up and saying things. But what annoys a lot of people is that 80% of the legislation that goes to the House of Commons is produced in Brussels and we simply rubber stamp it. That's not what they think Parliament's for. What we want to do is something positive, which is to regain control of our destiny. We don't mind doing bilateral deals with people, but that assumes that we're in a position of sovereignty in the first place so that we can do a deal. Which brings me to recapturing the word internationalist. Now, internationalist is nowadays used to mean the opposite of those nasty little Englander xenophobes in the BNP, BDP. Internationalist. Well, that's not what it suggests to me. It suggests actually one nationalist talking to another. Internationalist. What those people are is anti-nationalists and super-nationalists who want to abolish all nation states and subsume them under a federal Europe in which England will just be a historical memory. That is not an internationalist, because an internationalist is somebody who maintains a dialogue with other people who are probably just as patriotic, just as nationalist as he or she is, on the basis of some sort of fairness and equality, rather than going to war. What's happening now is that you're defining people from the state they happen to live in. In other words, you come and arrive in Britain, you're a Briton. You're being ascribed a retrospective ethnicity from the state whose passport you happen to hold, the little slip of paper you signed, the oath you may have made in Bradford Town Hall for 5 minutes. We have to fight economism. We are constantly told that we need new arrivals to make the economy work. But that's getting things in the wrong order. The economy serves the society, not the society, the economy. We are not all wage slaves working to support something called the British economy as the goal of our lives. We do not get up in the morning and think, I must do my bit to support the British economy. And if that calls for more Poles or Latvians or Indians or Pakistanis, so be it. We normally think, I want the community of Britain to be doing well and the economy to be just big enough to manage that and to make sure that everybody has a job and a reasonable standard of living, and then stop. But I don't necessarily want to have the world's biggest economy if in order to do it I have to suck in most of the world to act as a workforce. Because that is not what countries are for. So all these are cultural battles that we have to fight with UKIP, and as people have said up and down the hall, these are all points on which UKIP has not really got any answers. It's only because the media are quite willing to conceal the Emperor's nakedness that the Emperor, Mr. Farage, I believe, is getting away with murder, because all the awkward questions are being kept from view. It's our job, up and down the country, in leaflets and on the website, to make these points and to say, well, Mr. Farage, what's your answer? But that hasn't been done so far. Thank you.
As these people have nowhere else to go. Griffin is up to his old tricks again, trying to reinvent himself. Since his expulsion from the BNP, with the formation of some new group which is called the British Voice. His use of risque imagery, street demos or the advocation thereof, with torchlit marches and an emblem that uses a large V over the top of a circle, which is not unlike the one used by Generation Identity, I hasten to add, is quite interesting. The Generation Identity emblem is itself based on the ancient Athenian hoplite shield, if you must have seen it, you know, with the A without the bar along the bottom of it, and that's the sort of thing that Griffin's using, but instead of an A like that, it's a V on a sort of like disc, which in some respects evokes images of certain other emblems and images used by parties of, say, the first third of the last century. Yeah, this is quite ironic because Griffin has spent the last 15 years trying to distance himself from those sort of images, first by getting rid of the original BNP emblem, which was just the ordinary letters on a disc, and then transferring over to the sort of italicised letters, and then subsequently using a sort of, some people describe it as a sort of half-eaten cheese sandwich, you know, with a few bits of colour thrown in. Yeah, damp cloth, a dishcloth or something.
Call it on an off day.
Yeah, as you can see, Griffin's jumping from one place to the next. You know, his, much of his influence, of course, is, I think his only field of influence now is the northwest of England, and he doesn't really have any you know, tested and seasoned nationalists going back decades, or 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, he's got the people he's got at the moment, the sort of fairly new people. There's one or two youngsters who are a little bit naive, but that's something else. This leaves the BDP as the only credible election fighting vehicle to the right of UKIP. As independently minded individuals, I think we need to network. This is absolutely essential. We need to work with everybody in whatever circumstances that might emerge, even helping out as individuals on some of the more, how should we say, outreach type activities, on the proviso that this is undertaken on an individual discretionary basis and not as representatives of the BDP per se. This can help attract younger people who are more enthusiastic and energetic. Obviously, this precludes working and networking with some of the more criminal elements that exist within the wider movement. I strongly recommend the formation of a BDP youth section. This is important. This would assist the process of cross-fertilisation caused by intergroup overlap. Also, the organisation of non-party political discussion and seminar forums. This would assist the dissemination of ideas and facilitate social networking opportunities with other individuals. I mean, Jez is involved with London Forum meetings. These originated from London New Right. These have been going on for nearly a decade now. At the beginning of this month, we witnessed the first Yorkshire Forum meeting, which attracted about 30 attendees. Another group too worth watching is the Traditional Britain group. TBG meetings attract people on the borders of the establishment. TBG would have no time for someone like Nick Griffin or someone like Paul Golding. This group has aroused the ire of hope not hate, who have written of the threat posed by its borderline established connections. To conclude, in order for the BDB to grow, we have to be an open-minded, broad church, welcoming all but the obviously self-serving and asocial. It's too easy to be standoffish, judgmental. We just need to look for new alternatives, hence the growth of UKIP. Let's show the British public we are the real thing, and we're not like UKIP, we mean business. That's it.
Because we do have an ethical case to put, and to say it politely. Firm policies, but said in moderate language. We could provide advice to third world countries on improving their lot, without giving them lots and lots of money in foreign aid. And we should be getting 2 million unemployed people back into work. It doesn't do them any good, it's unnecessary, and they're kept in unemployment because of mass immigration and other people undermining them from wages and taking their jobs, basically. It's denied, but that's what is happening. We need to grow the BDP. More elections, get more members, and put more leaflets out that will have contact coupons on them that people can get in touch with us. No leaflet should ever be without the ability of someone to sign on it, send it off to us, and get involved. We need to make a proper effort to get more members. We need to be positive, to offer real hope for a better future to people who are really quite struggling at the moment. Pensioners particularly, young people who can't get jobs. Time is still on our side at the moment, but it won't stay that way forever. Our job is to appeal to our own people before it's too late. So the sooner the better. That's it.
Since its inception 2 years ago, the British Democratic Party has stood candidates in 14 elections. If you'd like to know more about the Brit Dems, go to www.britishdemocraticparty.org and click on the contact option. To join, you can click on the application form, or you can apply directly to British Democratic Party, PO Box 10376, Loughborough, LE11 9HT, or telephone 07513 975 408.